I've always been the family disappointment. At least that's what my sister Madison made sure everyone believed. Sarah dropped out of college again, she'd announce at family gatherings, her voice dripping with that special blend of pity and disgust she'd perfected over the years. I can still picture her sitting there in her designer clothes, engagement ring catching the light as she gestures dramatically. She's throwing her life away to play on computers all day. My parents would exchange those looks, you know, the ones where concern meets resignation. Dad would clear his throat uncomfortably while Mom would quickly change the subject to Madison's latest promotion at her prestigious Manhattan law firm. What none of them knew was that my playing on computers had turned into a thriving business. I'd developed a security algorithm that major tech companies were fighting to license. My freelance work had evolved into a startup that was quietly revolutionizing app development. But I never corrected them. Never showed the bank statements or the contracts. Why? I'm still asking myself that question. Maybe it was because I'd spent so many years being Serafina Blackwood, the family failure, that I wasn't ready to shed that identity. Or maybe, and this is harder to admit, a part of me wanted to see how far they'd go in their judgment before I revealed the truth. My brownstone in Brooklyn became my sanctuary. 3 stories of hardwood floors, exposed brick, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a tree-lined street. I bought it outright last year, no mortgage, no loans. Just a wire transfer that made my banker's eyes widen. The real estate agent had assumed I was purchasing for a foreign investor until I signed my own name on the papers. "Are you sure you want to live here alone, Ms. Blackwood?" she'd asked, glancing around the spacious living room. "It's quite a lot of house for one person." I remember smiling as I took the keys. I've spent my whole life being underestimated. This house is just the beginning. And it was. 2 more properties followed, an apartment in San Francisco near my company's new office and a cabin in the Adirondacks where I could escape when the city became too much. My company, Black Code Solutions, crossed the 8-figure valuation mark last quarter. Not bad for a college dropout who lives on her computer. But to my family, I was still just Sarah, the disappointment who couldn't hold down a real job. The one who needed to get her act together before it's too late. Madison's words, not mine, last Thanksgiving changed everything. Madison called to inform me, not ask, inform, that she'd be bringing her new fiancé, David, to meet the family. "We'll come to your place," she declared. "Mom and Dad are renovating, and David wants to see New York. Though I've warned him not to expect much from your living situation." I could have corrected her then. Could have mentioned that my living situation was featured in Architectural Digest last spring. Instead, I just said, "Sure, Madison. Looking forward to it." As I hung up the phone, I looked around at my beautiful home and made a decision. Thanksgiving would be the day the truth finally came out. I just had no idea how dramatically it would unfold. The week before Thanksgiving, I threw myself into preparations. If this was going to be my coming out party as the successful entrepreneur I'd become, everything needed to be perfect. I hired a professional decorator to transform my already beautiful home into a Thanksgiving wonderland. Tasteful autumn arrangements adorned every surface. The dining room table, a single slab of reclaimed oak that had cost more than Madison's first car, was set with my grandmother's china and crystal that I'd quietly purchased when my parents decided to sell it. "This is quite the setup for a family dinner," remarked my assistant, Zoe, as she helped me arrange name cards. She was one of the few people who understood the significance of this gathering. "Are you sure you don't want to just tell them beforehand? Maybe ease them into it?" I shook my head, adjusting a perfectly folded napkin. "They've had years to see me as I am, not as they assumed I was. They never bothered to ask about my work or my life. They just decided who I was. The doorbell rang at exactly 4 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my simple but exquisitely tailored dress, another detail they wouldn't notice or appreciate, and opened the door. "Sarah!" My mother embraced me, the familiar scent of her Chanel perfume enveloping me. "You look different. Did you do something with your hair?" "New job?" my father asked hopefully, his standard greeting for the past decade. Before I could answer, Madison swept in, pulling a tall, handsome man behind her. "David, this is my sister Sarah." "Sarah, this is David Harrington, my fiancé. He's a real estate developer." David extended his hand with a warm smile that seemed genuine. "Pleasure to meet you, Sarah. Madison's told me so much about you." I couldn't help but wonder exactly what she'd told him. That I was the family disappointment? The cautionary tale of wasted potential? "Welcome to my home," I said simply, ushering them inside. The reactions were immediate and varied. My mother gasped softly, taking in the soaring ceilings and designer furniture. My father frowned in confusion, clearly trying to reconcile this space with his mental image of where his failure daughter should live. Madison's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Did you redecorate for us?" she asked, her tone suggesting this was all for show. "No," I replied, taking their coats. "This is how I live." "You must have a very understanding landlord," my mother said, running her fingers along the marble countertop in the kitchen, "to let you make all these changes." I just smiled. "Dinner will be ready in about 20 minutes. Why don't you all make yourselves comfortable? There's wine breathing in the dining room." As they moved through my home, I could hear Madison's hushed voice. She must be in serious debt. This place is way beyond what she could afford. It's just like Sarah to be so irresponsible. I busied myself in the kitchen, where I'd prepared most of the meal myself, with a few dishes from a high-end caterer. The turkey was perfect, the sides abundant, the presentation worthy of a magazine spread. When I called them to dinner, they gathered around my table with expressions ranging from confusion to suspicion. Madison raised her glass for a toast. "To family," she said, "and to new beginnings. David and I have some news. We've put an offer on a condo in Tribeca. It's small, but it's a start." "That's wonderful, honey," my mother beamed. "What about you, Sarah?" my father asked, his tone gentle but condescending. "Any prospects on the horizon? Job interviews? Maybe thinking about finishing your degree?" Before I could answer, Madison laughed, that sharp, dismissive laugh I'd grown to hate. "Dad, come on. Sarah's almost 30. If she was going to get her act together, it would have happened by now." I took a sip of my wine, an exclusive vintage from a small vineyard in Napa where I was an investor. "Actually, I'm doing quite well." Madison rolled her eyes. "Sure you are. Living in this place that you clearly can't afford, with no real job, no degree, no future. I mean, look at you, you're a complete failure by any normal standard." The table fell silent. My mother looked down at her plate. My father shifted uncomfortably. David looked mortified at his fiancée's outburst, and that's when everything changed. The silence that followed Madison's outburst was deafening. I could hear the antique grandfather clock in the hallway ticking away seconds that felt like hours. My mother stared intently at her plate, while my father examined his wine glass as if it contained the secrets of the universe. It was David who finally broke the silence, but not in the way anyone expected. "Wait a minute," he said, frowning slightly. "This address. I know this property." He turned to look at me with new interest. This is the Westbrook brownstone, isn't it? The one that sold last year for, he paused, glancing uncomfortably at Madison, well over $2 million. Cash deal, if I remember correctly. Madison snorted. Don't be ridiculous, David. Sarah's renting. Probably spending every penny she makes on this place to keep up appearances. David shook his head. No, I'm certain. My firm bid on this property for a client. It's unmistakable, those original crown moldings, the restored staircase. The sale was the talk of the office because the buyer was so young and paid in full. No mortgage. He looked at me with growing realization. The buyer was a woman who ran a tech company. All eyes turned to me. I took another sip of my wine, savoring the moment I'd waited years for. You're right, David, I said calmly. I bought this house last year. Cash deal. My father's fork clattered against his plate. That's impossible, Sarah. You couldn't possibly. I founded Black Code Solutions 4 years ago, I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. We specialize in security algorithms and app development. Last year, we were valued at just over $10 million. This year, we're projecting to double that. Madison's face had drained of all color. You're lying. I reached for my phone, opened my banking app, and slid it across the table to her. I'm not. And this house isn't my only property. I also own a place in San Francisco and a cabin in the Adirondacks. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Serafina, why didn't you tell us? It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself many times. Would you have believed me? Any of you? I looked around the table. You all decided years ago who I was and what I was worth. You never asked about my work, never showed any interest in what I was actually doing with my life. You just assumed I was failing because I wasn't following Madison's path. But dropping out of college, my father began, was the best decision I ever made. I finished for him. College was teaching me outdated programming languages and business models. I needed to be in the real world, building real solutions. The algorithm that became the foundation of my company? I developed it in my apartment while you all thought I was wasting my life on the computer. David was looking at me with undisguised admiration. Black Code Solutions, wait, aren't you the ones who developed that security protocol that's being implemented by major banks now? I nodded. That's us. We have contracts with 6 of the 10 largest financial institutions in the country. Madison pushed her plate away, her appetite apparently gone. Why go through this charade? Why let us believe you were struggling all this time? It was the question I'd been waiting for. Because I wanted to be valued for who I am, not what I own or earn. I wanted my family to be proud of me because I was following my passion and working hard, not because I was successful by conventional standards. I looked directly at Madison. I wanted to be seen, not judged. My father cleared his throat, his eyes suspiciously moist. Sarah, I don't know what to say. We've been so wrong about you. Yes, I agreed quietly. You have. Madison stood abruptly. I need some air. She walked out onto the terrace, leaving an uncomfortable silence in her wake. David looked apologetically at me. She's just processing. This is a lot to take in. I nodded, understanding more than he knew. It's fine. There's dessert when everyone's ready. I made Mom's apple pie recipe. My mother reached across the table and took my hand, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, Serafina. We should have believed in you. As I squeezed her hand, I realized that this moment of vindication didn't feel as satisfying as I'd imagined. Yes, they now knew the truth about my success, but the deeper truth, that they had failed to see my worth beyond material achievements, was a harder pill for all of us to swallow. Madison stayed on the terrace for nearly half an hour. Through the glass doors, I could see her pacing, talking on her phone, occasionally wiping at her eyes. When she finally returned, her makeup was slightly smudged, but her composure had been restored. I called the office, she announced, sliding back into her chair. Asked them to run a check on Black Code Solutions. She looked at me with new eyes, not warm, exactly, but different. You weren't exaggerating. No, I said simply. I wasn't. My father, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. Sarah, I don't understand why you kept this from us. We're your family. We would have celebrated your success. Would they, though? I wondered. Or would they have found ways to diminish it, to suggest it wasn't real success because it didn't follow their prescribed path? I think, David said carefully, that sometimes it's hard to see people as they are when we've already decided who they should be. He glanced apologetically at Madison. We all do it. My mother began clearing plates, a nervous habit from my childhood whenever conversations became too intense. I gently took the dishes from her hands. Leave them, Mom. I have someone coming tomorrow to clean up. Of course you do, Madison muttered, but without her usual edge. I served dessert, my mother's apple pie recipe that I'd perfected over the years, alongside artisanal ice cream from a local creamery. As we ate in awkward silence, I realized that this revelation, while satisfying on one level, had created a new kind of distance between us. So what happens now? My father finally asked. Do we just pretend the last few years didn't happen? I set down my spoon. No. We acknowledge them. We learn from them. I looked around the table. I kept my success secret partly out of hurt and partly out of pride. That wasn't entirely fair to you. But you all made assumptions about me without ever really asking what I wanted or valued. That wasn't fair either. Madison pushed her dessert around her plate. I always thought you resented me, she said quietly. For following the path everyone expected. For making Mom and Dad proud. Her vulnerability surprised me. I never resented your choices, Madison. I resented that my different choices were automatically considered inferior. They weren't, she admitted. I see that now. I worked so hard to do everything right. To be perfect. And you just did your own thing. And ended up more successful than me anyway. She looked up. Her eyes shining with unshed tears. Do you know how that feels? For the first time in years, I felt a genuine connection with my sister. Actually, I do. I've spent my entire adult life feeling like no matter what I achieved, it would never be enough for this family. David reached over and squeezed Madison's hand. Success isn't a zero-sum game. Your sister's achievements don't diminish yours. My father cleared his throat. He's right. And I think we, your mother and I, are partly to blame for creating that competition between you girls. He looked at me with genuine regret. We should have supported your path, Sarah, not just the one we understood. I'd like to know about your company, my mother said suddenly. Really no, not just the valuation. What do you do? Are you happy? It was such a simple question, but one they'd never really asked before. And so I told them about the late nights coding, the exhilaration of solving complex problems, the team I'd built, the clients who trusted us. I told them about the scholarship program I'd started for young women in tech, and the mentoring I did at the community center near my San Francisco office. As I spoke, I could see them truly listening, perhaps for the first time, to who I was. Not who they thought I should be. When the evening finally wound down, Madison lingered as the others gathered their coats. I said some unforgivable things tonight, she admitted. And probably for years before that. I nodded, not denying it. Yes, you did. I'm not asking for instant forgiveness, she continued. But I am asking for a chance to know the real you. The sister I apparently never bothered to understand. I considered her request. Part of me wanted to hold on to the hurt, to make her work harder for reconciliation. But I was tired of walls and secrets. I'd like that, I said finally. Maybe we could have lunch next week? I can show you my office. A genuine smile, perhaps the first I'd seen from her in years, lit up her face. I'd like that too. After they left, I stood in my beautiful, quiet home, reflecting on the evening. The revelation of my success hadn't magically healed our families' dysfunction or erased years of judgment. But it had created an opening, a chance for something new to grow in the space where assumptions once stood. True success, I realized, wasn't measured in property values or company valuations. It wasn't even about proving people wrong, satisfying as that might be. Real success was having the courage to forge your own path, to build a life that reflected your values, not someone else's expectations. As I gathered the last of the wine glasses, my phone pinged with a text from Madison. I'm proud of you. Not because of what you've achieved, but because you had the courage to be yourself when none of us made that easy. I smiled, feeling something shift inside me, a letting go of the need for validation I'd carried for so long. My success story wasn't about the millions in my bank account or the properties I owned. It was about finding the strength to be authentically myself in a world that constantly tried to tell me who I should be, and that, I realized, was something worth celebrating. The Sunday after Thanksgiving, Madison texted me unexpectedly, "Coffee? There's something I need to say in person." We met at a cafe near the Brooklyn Bridge. She'd already ordered my favorite latte, a small gesture that surprised me. I've been thinking about what happened, Madison said after a moment of silence. I was jealous of your freedom, not your money. You had the courage to build a life on your own terms, while I've spent my entire life chasing other people's approval. She told me about a conversation with David after Thanksgiving. He'd asked her what she would do if she wasn't afraid of disappointing everyone, a question she couldn't answer. That's why I wanted to see you, she admitted. To ask how you found the courage to walk away from everyone's expectations. It wasn't courage at first, I explained. It was desperation. I was failing at being who everyone wanted me to be. The courage came later, when I had to believe in myself despite everyone's disapproval. Madison nodded. I think I've been living my life for an audience. Every achievement only felt real if someone else validated it. Then she shared something unexpected. She'd accepted a position with a nonprofit focused on tech accessibility, at less than half her current salary. I haven't told Mom and Dad yet, she confessed. I wanted to talk to you first. You're the only one who might understand choosing meaning over status. For the first time in our adult lives, we spend an hour truly talking about our dreams, fears, and hopes. No competition, no judgment. Walking along the promenade afterward, Madison linked her arm through mine. I have a proposition. Black Code Solutions and my new organization could collaborate on digital accessibility projects. This professional respect meant more than any apology. One more thing, she added as we prepared to part ways. David and I are postponing the wedding. We're both making big life changes, and we want to make sure we're doing it for the right reasons. I realized then that my greatest achievement wasn't my company or properties. It was the courage to live authentically, a courage that had somehow built a bridge back to my sister. Some successes can't be measured in dollars. Some victories happen in quiet moments when we finally see each other clearly, beyond the labels that once divided us.